The title of my talk today is going to be on mentoring underrepresented students, as Robert has indicated, a roadmap to success for mentors and mentees. And someone might wonder, why would anyone have the audacity to say this? Well, I have hundreds and hundreds of examples, and probably over 1,000 examples of students that I've mentored that have gone on to success. And I've learned a few things from those students, and hopefully they've learned a few things from me. In fact, I'm writing a book on mentoring right now as a result of that. In addition to talking about my journey into mentoring, I will have about 100 examples from my students of how I've mentored them in that book. Okay. So what about the idea of mentoring students? Well, let me take you back on a journey to when I was first in Louisiana. I grew up in Louisiana, and Emil Petrie, I see, is on the screen. He recognized this is not Bunkie, but we certainly had our share of lightning storms when we were in Bunkie. And invariably, when you were in Bunkie and you had lightning storms at my age group, what would happen, all of the lights would go out. And so you had to deal with that. And how did you deal with that? We would have kerosene lamps. And I was just a curious person. I was about 2 years old when I was first introduced to kerosene lamp and kerosene. So I was curious, what was this mysterious liquid that they were using, and how did it generate light? Now, my parents were always secure enough to just hide that stuff away from me, until one day they didn't completely put it away. And so I decided that out of my curiosity, there must be some way to get a hold of this liquid. And then when they left that cabinet open, I decided to try an experiment. And I say that this is my first experiment in chemistry, where I essentially sampled kerosene. You can imagine what the results were. Straight to the hospital. My grandmother told me I was totally limp. I couldn't communicate or anything, and they took me to the hospital and had tubing coming out of my nose, my mouth, down my lung, everywhere. And so I put my chemistry experiments on hold, but still dream maybe one day I'll be a chemist. So I'm dreaming here of Isiah Warner, the chemist, someday. And needless to say, my chemistry experiment stopped at that point, because I found out that tasting is not a method of chemical analysis. And so at the age of about 11 or 12, I got a chemistry set for my for Christmas present. And but my grandmother was still leery of me and any kinds of chemicals, so I couldn't go in the house. This is my brother and I, right after our first communion. And so I couldn't go in the house and use these chemicals. My grandmother would send me outside to do these experiments. And I went on to high school at Carver High School and graduated valedictorian of my class. This was a time when still had segregation. I did some experimental research when I was at Southern. And I went on to Southern and got a full scholarship. Again, mentioning Emil Petrie, he led the way. He got a full scholarship to Southern, majored in chemistry. So Emil Petrie and I have been together for years. I had to follow Emil. Even on the graduate school, he went on to the University of Washington to get his PhD. I had to go to the University of Washington to get my PhD, because Emil was my role model. So in terms of mentoring, there are lots of definitions of mentoring. If you look through the literature, you'll see one-on-one non-judgmental relationship as one that's quite frequently used, and one that I don't necessarily accept, because it doesn't have to be one-on-one. The other is support, assistance, and advocacy. Why is this thing? an adult who can provide a pupil with guidance. And we know that that's not acceptable because nowadays young people can essentially guide older people through. And this is the one I've sort of developed: a wise and trusted person who imparts skills, knowledge, or goals to another person or persons through exchange of ideas. Let's see. So mentoring is more than teaching. Mentors function in 4 different roles: as a teacher, as a counselor, as an intervener, and as a sponsor. Many people associate simply teaching with mentoring. And mentoring is really more than just teaching. You must have all 4 of these roles to be a true mentor. So what are the benefits of mentoring? Mentee gains advice and guidance from a counselor with greater experience, a lasting friendship, improving self-confidence and self-esteem, increased motivation, the yellow brick road to success.
Okay. Dr. Warner, I hate to interrupt. Do you mind just clicking the middle button to turn the captions back on?
Oh, they're not on?
There we go. Perfect.
Okay. And the second is mentor, opportunity to develop skills and understanding, working with others, increase understanding of the need of others, experience in helping others to achieve their goals, really a deep inner satisfaction. Now, this is my personal feelings, is that I get a deep inner satisfaction from helping others. And the final thing is what I think is extremely important, is that you develop future mentors. Now, in terms of chemistry, let's talk about the chemistry department. The chemistry department was featured in Chemical and Engineering News in December 2001. And here's the title of the article: What is Louisiana State doing right? LSU, largest producer of African-American chemistry PhDs, boosts a model graduate education program. And later on in 2014, there was another article featuring chemistry, and it was talking about trends in PhD productivity and diversity in top 50 universities, top 50 defined as universities ranked by the amount of NSF funding that they received. What was the conclusion in that article? Primary conclusion in that article was LSU was not only ranked #1 in the percentage of PhDs to underrepresented minorities, but also the percentage of PhDs awarded to women, which is an incredible accomplishment. We were aware of the second. We were not aware of the first until this article came out. And here's a table we can glean from that data. If you look at, for example, Berkeley, they graduated an average of 65 PhDs, while we graduate an average of 19 PhDs per year. The rank and percentage of our PhDs we graduate is we're #1. The rank for underrepresented minorities, we're #1, not only in terms of numbers, but also in terms of percentage. So we're #1 in both of these categories. And if you want to look up this article, it was published in the Journal of Chemical Education in 2014. Now let's examine LSU chemistry in the early years. From about 1965 to 1985, I'm going to look at that particular period because before 1965, there had never been a Black person in the LSU chemistry program, primarily because LSU was segregated during that time. But around 1968, there were 2 African Americans in the chemistry program. One was Richard Evans. Some of you might know him. He was chair of chemistry at Alabama A&M for a number of years. He recently died in 1971. No, I'm sorry, he died a couple of years ago. but he was at LSU from 65 to 71. Mildred Smalley, who taught at Southern University, in fact, was one of my teachers. Don Pryor was a contemporary of mine. He was from Avoyelles Parish, and we knew each other for a long period of time. We even played baseball together. And so this is the time of Don Pryor. And so during that time period, LSU ended up graduating 3 total African-American PhDs. If we move forward in time, we see what the program looks like now. Now, the peak here is 35. So these high numbers are in the low 30s. Now, while LSU had, before this time period, graduated a total of 6 African-American PhDs, we have approximately 93 right now. And if we look at that number with the current students, we're approaching 100 African-American PhDs in chemistry, and that's an incredible accomplishment. Now, if you want to wonder when I arrived at LSU, you go back and look at 1992, when suddenly, before this, we had never had more than 3 African-Americans in the program one time. Suddenly we have 11. And how did that happen? We had 2 African-Americans in the program. 4 others had applied and decided to matriculate at LSU. I came in with 11 graduate students, 5 of whom 10 graduate students, 5 of whom were African-American. So in a program that had never had more than 3 at one time, we now have 11. And I became chair of the department against my will. I was sort of forced to become chair, and that's another story. But from that point on, the numbers started increasing. I was chair from 1994 to 1997. Now you might think, well, we're actively recruiting. No, that's not the case. I'm well known among chemistry professors at HBCUs and around the country. And so when I became chair, they felt comfortable in sending their African-American students to LSU because they knew that I would look after them. And so that's how those numbers started increasing. So if we look at women were always from about 2004, about roughly 49 to 50% of our population. One time, number went over 50%. I think it was like 53%. But typically it was right around 50%. So if you double this number, you know approximately our graduate population. And in blue here are the graduates. Now I haven't updated this. Certainly this number goes on up to 2020, but I'll have to update that slide at some time. Well, what are the selection criteria? We certainly looked at the GPA, didn't worry about where they came from. We felt that students who were accustomed to doing well continued to do well. We looked at the letters of references closely. We looked at the GRE, but soon realized that the GRE was not an accurate predictor of students that would do well in our program. The personal interview was more important than the GRE. And in fact, I should have listed GRE last because we ultimately stopped looking at the GRE as a major consideration. We looked at it, but it was not a major consideration. What are the factors? Mentoring and support, proximity of HBCUs, and I'll go through that. We had a critical mass. We figured that 11 graduate students was a critical mass. Students do well in your program, they go back and tell their colleagues at their undergraduate institution, LSU is the place to be. And that's how things started building, along with what I told you about knowing a lot of the people at these schools. Faculty collusion. There was a couple of faculty when I was chair saying that I was denigrating the PhDs of graduate students and that they spread this to the graduates, to the other graduate students. And so as chair, I called a retreat for our faculty where we talked about growth and what we're going to do. Then I had a facilitator come in and had invited all the graduate students in. And I knew that it would come up about my bringing in inferior students. We were bringing in the best students that we thought we could get. And in fact, they were performing at a level that we expected them to. And soon the idea came up about bringing in inferior students. And one of my Black students came to me and said, Dr. Warner, these are our friends talking about us like this. And I said, yes, I wanted you guys to hear that. What are you going to do about it? Well, the Black students started outperforming the white students. Now, you can't call somebody inferior forever if they're outperforming you. At some point, that began to go away. As I indicated, self-sustained recruiting, students had a good experience, and employability. Companies started coming to LSU wanting to recruit our students. As chair, I said, you can recruit our students, but you're not going to recruit just our Black students. You're going to recruit all of our students. And so everyone benefited from this whole idea of employability. I said we were surrounded by HBCUs within the state of Louisiana. We have about 6 HBCUs. Over next door to Texas, not too far away, we have Prairie View and Texas Southern. And over in Mississippi, there are 4 HBCUs. So we have the advantage of being surrounded by HBCUs, although I'm going to show you a chart in a minute that shows you that most of our students do not come just from these HBCUs. They come from all over the East Coast. And here's that chart, which needs to be updated because we've had some students, at least one student from Prairie View and at least 2 or 3 from Texas Southern that have gotten their PhDs in our program. But you can see we've had students by the red marks all over the East Coast primarily. So these students became active in LSU and Southern's campus leadership activities. They were active as campus tutors in the Center for Academic Success. They were active in community charitable activities. In fact, they would go out to local schools and give talks. So here are these elementary school teachers, students who see persons that look like themselves working on PhDs. And that made them want to aspire to getting PhDs. LSU was also listed as a hotspot for diversity by LSU News, and my name was specifically mentioned. I had friends from all over the country and saying, well, I've never seen a professor's name being mentioned in US News before, but my name was mentioned, and so all they talked about was the chemistry program. And here are the initial group of students. The ones I have circled were the ones from my research group. And this young man, he's at Procter & Gamble right now. And he actually would have come to LSU, both of these young men. This one is at Johnson & Johnson leading a research group. They would have come to Emory had I stayed at Emory, but they decided to come to LSU to work with me. We have an active Nova Shea chapter. This is one of my students. Nick is one of the brightest students I've ever taught. I mean, he is so smart. He's one of these guys that's so smart, he doesn't know what he wants to do. Got his PhD in chemistry. Now he thinks he wants to go to medical school and get a medical degree. He wants to do an MBA. I mean, he is incredibly smart. I just don't know how I can continue to say any more about him. Now, what about for undergraduates? There's a hierarchy mentoring strategy that we developed for undergraduates. And basically, what we wanted to do was develop a supportive, motivating, and diverse environment that would be learning communities. And in order to spell academic success, we felt that these are three components that were necessary: mentoring, education, and research. So we built those three components into our program. And our program at that time was called the STEM program, Louisiana Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics program. So hierarchy mentoring was a substantial part of that program. I'll show you a hierarchy mentoring graph in a minute. But the program that was funded initially by NSF and Research Corporation provided the staff. And the objectives of the program was to fund high ability students. We wanted 25 students per year with a steady state of about 90 students. The students would be diverse. The reason for that is within Louisiana, despite integration, schools are still very much segregated. Most of the minority students go to the public school system. Most of the white students go to private and parochial school. In the Baton Rouge Parish, which is about 50% minority, the public school is 85% minority. Our program, we wanted to reach a minimum of 75% retention rate. Remember that, 75%. I thought at the time that is a huge goal because LSU's overall retention rate in the regular population is not that high, and to achieve that kind of retention in STEM would be incredible. Well, you'll see that later on that we exceeded our expectations. And it assists at least 50% of the participants to go on and pursue PhDs. Here is the funding, phase 1 and phase 2. Louisiana Border Region contributed substantially to the phase 2 operation. This young man was part of our program, Brandon Pitts, from Baton Rouge. He's now on the faculty at Purdue. He's an assistant professor of civil engineering at Purdue University. We had a special selection process, and the selection process is such that I can't completely explain it to you without going into a lot of detail. So I'm going to skip over that if you want to know. In fact, we're writing an article on our selection process. And Melissa Crawford, who's probably on this talk, is spearheading that. And I think it's going to be an exciting article, and it's going to be the kind of article that people hadn't thought about. And it's going to show you that if you simply look at credentials alone, you're missing out on a lot of students. And that's the focus of the article, showing a selection process that allows you to pick the students that will survive and do well. Improved study and note-taking skills was part. Enhanced metacognitive skills, we worked with Sandra McGuire on that. Group interaction skills, time management skills, enhanced science comprehension through research. There's a study done by the University of Michigan that shows that students who do research jump a letter grade higher. And out of those that jump the highest, minority students tend to jump the highest by doing research. And development of mentoring skills, that hierarchy mentoring model that I talked about. And here's basically what that looked like. Here I am at the top of this pyramid, or this ladder. Here are the LSU STEM students. In between are their various mentors and regular mentors and research mentors, graduate student mentors, professional staff mentors. And these students, while they're being mentoring, they learned the mentoring process by mentoring other students. They mentored high school students, other undergraduates. In fact, our program was spread outside of our immediate program, and other students would benefit from the kinds of things that we were teaching our students. So the target was undergraduates in STEM. We had a summer bridge program where they come in the summer before entering college, and also go on to do undergraduate research in the summers. And during the academic year, we did lots of activities. I'll let you read those. What's the composition? We had 20%, 26% of the students were white females, 22% white males, African American, 17% female, and 18% male. Asians, we had 5% and 3%. Hispanics, 4% of each, and 1% Native Americans. In terms of what colleges they would come from, most of our students were in the College of Science, and the next highest population, 39% were in the College of Engineering, and then Ag and School of Coast and Environment. What were the requirements? They had to participate in the summer bridge. They would get a financial award of up to $12,500 per year. At that time, LSU's tuition and housing was about $10,000, so they would net about $2,500 for other things like books, and etc. They were automatically admitted into the LSU Honors College, even though some of them didn't meet the normal criteria for the Honors College. I invited our dean of the Honors College to sit on our selection process. And when she saw our selection process, she came to me and said, any student that you admit into your program is automatically admitted into the Honors College. And some of those students who would not normally meet the Honors College criteria ended up performing better than their normal selection students. Undergraduate research, problem-solving skills, writing skills. A student who's going to go into science, if they can write well, they will perform well in graduate school, and there will be an added bonus to them. Dr. Christina Jones, PhD in chemistry. She was one of my undergraduates. She went on to Georgia Tech. Got it. Those of you that are HHMI professors know that the HHMI XROP program is phenomenal. These students, and she was an HHMI XROP scholar at Georgia Tech. She's now a research chemist at NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. Here is what our summer bridge program looked like. We have a program called University Medalist. This young man, who was African American, was a university medalist. In order to be a university medalist, you have to have a perfect 4.0 the entire time you're at LSU. Now, he came out of a public school system and had a perfect 4.0. He is now a practicing dentist. We had a course that we call our success course. The first part, the purplish part, or grayish part, depending on how it shows up on your screen, is for the freshman year. The yellow is sophomore year. The greenish part is junior year, and the orange is the senior year. And we would teach basic things that were important each year. And just to give you an example, I'm showing you the years. For the freshman year, study skills, effective study, group study. Most of these students come from high school. They're accustomed to going home, going into their rooms, locking themselves in their room, studying by themselves. Group study is a critical skill in college, whether it's undergraduate or graduate. Here, fundamentals of getting published. Remember, these students are doing research. So this is just an example of courses taught in the sophomore year. All of these were in a 1-hour, no credit course that we would give them. How could we force them to do all of these extra things? They also had to do some service in this. We forced them to do it by saying this is a part of your scholarship. And in the junior year, they would do things like review graduate school portfolio. In that way, we're encouraging them to prepare for graduate school. And senior year, they were required to do graduate applications. Even if they were telling you, I am not going to graduate school, they had to apply to graduate school. They had to do undergraduate research in the summer, as I indicated. First year was typically at LSU, but then they go on to other universities. And you can see some of these are some of the top universities in the country. And this young woman epitomizes, in my opinion, what the program was all about. She's a white female, not an underrepresented student, but yet when she went to graduate school at the University of Florida, she designed her own project. In addition, because she was so advanced in terms of a graduate student, she was bored and decided to set up a program for mentoring minority students. Now, that's the kind of connection we wanted, because early on, these students, because they went to segregated schools or separate schools, it was a difficult time getting them to interact and come together. Now, many of these students are such good friends that a white student might have a black student as a maid of honor, or a black male or white male might have a black male as his first man. And so these kinds of interaction just happen naturally. Once these students got exposed to each other, they figured out that education, as long as you're interested in education, that's all that matters. Not the color of your skin, but an interest in getting a better education. And so overall in the program, during those two periods, 10 years, we had 249 scholars, 161, were finishing the STEM program. 43% of those students graduated with at least a 3.7 GPA. That's pretty impressive. 52% women graduates, 30% minority graduates. 79% have completed or pursued post-baccalaureate degrees. I'll talk about that a little bit more. In addition to all of these other awards, 20 of those students were NSF Graduate Research Fellows, 8 Barrett Goldwaters, first ever DOD fellowship came out of our program. Udall Scholar, the first 2 ever for LSU, came out of our program. Gates Cambridge Scholar, first for LSU, and so on. Most of these were first, and as I mentioned, HHMI Gilliam Fellow. The LSU Tiger 12 honors, which are honors the top 12 students on campus in all criteria. LSU Distinguished Communicator. I'm not going to go through all of those awards. This is what I want to go through. If you look at LSU, highly selected programs, and moderately selected institutions. And the first bar will be the graduation rate of all students. Notice that the graduation rate of our students, 6-year graduation rate, is 90%. Remember our goal, 75%? It is 90%. Whereas the over LSU graduation rate is higher than this now. It's above 60%. But at that time, it was around 45%. And this is STEM graduation rate. And high select, but notice the disparity among the underrepresented minority students. In our population, we have about 83% graduation rate for minorities in STEM. Now you have to acknowledge that that is incredible. One thing, if Melissa's listening to this talk, I know she is, and Tiersla, we need to examine this more closely. I am positive the reason the minority students are lower because almost all of them went to the public school system, whereas almost all of the whites went to the private and parochial schools. And we need to look at that population of students and see if what I'm speculating is true or not. And notice that females graduated slightly above males, and they're about the same as the overall population rate. So we're really pleased with this project. There are not many programs in this country, if any, can compare with these kinds of graduation rate. In fact, I'm going to indicate, in case some of you are out there from UMBC, that we had the same evaluator who evaluates the UMBC program. And I won't give out the data, but what I will say is we compare favorably to the Meyerhoff program at UMBC. 89% overall graduation rate, 6-year graduation rate for STEM, that's incredible. And you can tell that's, I mean, almost double some of the graduation rates of, at other institutions. And so 36 have completed their PhDs. Some students took a detour. They went on and worked in industry, decided they were bored, and decided to come back and get their PhD. So some students have gone on to industry, but they've decided they were bored. 79% of the students in our program are either completed or pursuing post-baccalaureate degrees. Again, we exceeded all of our predictions for these programs. Dr. Byron George, this young man got his PhD in chemical engineering from the Georgia Tech Institute of Technology. Now, there were almost everybody was fighting for him when he graduated. Even Google tried to hire him, but he decided to go as an engagement manager at McKinsey & Company. We had an LSU STEM Connect program where many of our undergraduates were in graduate school. We decided to bring them back, and I tried to entice some of the departments to hire them as faculty. Now, most universities frown on hiring your own graduate students as faculty because you have an overlap with your current faculty, but that's not true if you have an undergraduate who's gone on and gotten a PhD somewhere else. Then it is very logical to think about them as possible faculty at your institution. There are students in here, well, at least one, I mentioned, where's Brandon? Brandon is in here somewhere. I mentioned, yeah, here's Brandon. He is a professor at Purdue. There's one young lady in here, I don't see her. She's a professor at Johns Hopkins, listed as one of the top 10 up and coming scientists in the country. And so here's the support for our program, HHMI, NSF, etc. I'd like to quickly go through a mentoring workshop. Now, this is the part, I know we're getting a little bit long in terms of the talk, but I would really like you to stay and go through this part with me, because I'm going to give you a couple of examples of my own mentoring. And then we're going to have some case studies of actual undergraduates that I've mentored. And I'm going to tell you what that problem was. And then we're going to work through and see if you can figure out how to solve that problem. And at the end of that, I'll tell you how I helped to solve that problem. So students often find themselves with a goal that is impeded by a brick wall. And they don't know how to get across this brick wall. And what I say is mentoring can be a battering ram that shatters that brick wall. And so that's the way I characterize mentoring. We shatter obstacles to goals. So I'm going to tell you 3 stories. Might shorten them to 2, but I'll tell you. One is Curry's story, Sally's story, and Unique's story. And I'm going to quickly go through those so we can get to the case studies. So here's Sally. Sally was an undergraduate who came to work with me in her freshman year. She said, I hear that you like to work with undergraduates and I want to do research. I said, yes, that's correct. I said, but let me tell you one thing, young lady. My rules, if you come to work with me, you stick with me the entire time you're in undergraduate school. Dr. Warner, you don't have to worry about that. So Sally was recently married, worked with me for about a year, came into my office. I have to quit. I say, look, I thought we had gone through this. Dr. Warner, I am pregnant and I cannot work with those chemicals while I'm pregnant. And she said, but I'll be back. I said, well, I'll see. And sure enough, a year later, she's back in my lab working. And the young lady was so bright. And in addition to having to deal with her kids, she eventually ended up having a divorce. And so she's a single parent, having to get a lot of loans. And I'm trying to encourage her to go to grad school. And she's telling me, I can't go to grad school. Why not, Sally? Well, I've got too much debt, Dr. Warner. I've got to go out and get a job. I said, Sally, there are lots of women who've gone through what you've gone through and have succeeded. Dr. Warner, I don't want to hear about these other persons. So I would find articles and I dropped them on her desk. And she kept saying, who's dropping these things on my desk? Those articles were about successful women who were either single parent or were married and had kids. And so finally she figured out it was me. And her senior year, I said, Sally, you have to apply to graduate school. Dr. Warner, we're not going through this over and over again. I am not going to graduate school. I said, look, your main problem is help with your kid. Is that correct? That's one problem, but the other is debt. I just cannot go to school. I have to go and work. I said, well, let's just try to overcome the first problem. Do you have relatives near a university? Yes, my parents live near Auburn, and my sister lives near Wake Forest. Apply to those two schools, Sally. So she gets accepted to both. And she comes to me and tells me, I told you you're wasting your time. I am not going to graduate school, Dr. Warner. Sally, why are you not? I told you about the bill problem. I said, but you're going to get a full fellowship to one of those schools. Dr. Warner, how do you know what I'm going to get? I'm willing to bet, Sally, that Auburn is going to give you a full scholarship. Yeah, sure. And so I call up Auburn and I tell them, look, this young lady is incredible. I mean, she is one of the best students I've ever had. Lots of universities are after her. You better give her a full scholarship or you're not going to have a chance. 2 weeks later, Sally runs to my office. Dr. Warner, I got a full fellowship to Auburn. Whoa, Sally, how did you do that? Well, I don't know, but I guess I'm just lucky. All right, you persuaded me. I'm going to graduate school. So she went to Auburn, got her PhD. And if you notice that the smog in Los Angeles is decreasing, she is running the environmental program that supports the entire city and helps to minimize the smog in Los Angeles. So Sally and her son moved to Los Angeles, and she is one of the persons that's responsible for eliminating the fog. So what is the lesson learned? There's always a path to your goal if you work hard enough. And Sally worked hard enough. Kurt was a young man born in a mid-American city, one that's often characterized as high in crime. You probably guess what that city is. It's in Illinois. And so his mother was very concerned. He was from a single parent household. And his mother was concerned that he was hanging around with the wrong people. So she found out about a program on the East Coast where a high school, where they were trying to recruit athletes and they would give them a full scholarship. She got him enrolled into that program and then sent him away to the East Coast. Kurt, at the end of his senior year, graduating with about a 2.4, 2.5 average. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it's somewhere around a 2.5 on either side. And he was talking with his high school counselor, and his counselor said, what are you going to do now, young man? You finished high school. Kurt said, well, I think I'm going to go to medical school. His counselor must have laughed for about 10 minutes. Come on, son, be serious. With your grade point average, how can you get in medical school? He said, well, that GPA is reflective of what you guys thought of me. And unfortunately, I bought into it. I was just focused on athletic. I'm a better student than that. So Curry, based on not on his GPA, but it's on his high aptitude test, got into Emory University. And I'm on the faculty at Emory, and he comes by to see me on occasion. And he tells me about his background. That's how I know about his background. During his senior year, he's sitting in my office and he says, you know something, Dr. Warner, my roommate is pretty wealthy. And I said, why do you say that, Curry? Well, he drives a BMW and he has this large screen television that we both enjoy looking at. And he says, but you know something, Dr. Warner, I'm wealthier than my roommate. Curry, how can you say that? I mean, I know your background. So I looked at him to see if he was serious. He was very serious. How can you be wealthier than your roommate? Well, Dr. Warner, my roommate has a 3.1 GPA. I have a 3.95 GPA. A 3.95 GPA at Emory will get you into any program you want to. Kurt went on to Cornell Medical School, graduating near the top of his class. And when he called me and told me that story, I said, Kurt, go back and talk to your high school counselor. Let him know what you've accomplished. And I don't know if he ever did go back, but he felt that it was too much of a bother to do all of that. Next person I want to tell you about, well, anyway, the lesson learned is do not let anyone else define you. You're the only person that can define yourself. And that's what Kurt did. He defined himself. He said he was worthy of medical school and then went on to prove it, despite what his counselor said. Last person I want to talk about is Unique. Unique was a high school student who came to work with me when she was in 11th grade. Her mother was ill with cancer and had just recently died when she came to work with me. And in fact, she came one year. The next year, her sister came with her. So they both came the following year to work in my laboratory. And I'll tell you about Unique first, and then I'll add on about her sister. And Unique was very bright. Some of you may know Raphael Luna. Unique is his baby sister. He's the one who wrote the book on scientific storytelling that many people are using to write proposals and manuscripts now. Well, this is his baby sister. And he was the one who insisted on her coming to work in my lab because he got his PhD from LSU and got to know me. And against his father's wishes, insisted that she come to work in my lab. Well, Unique was very bright. So I felt that she was eligible for one of these Gates Scholarship. She did not think that she was of that kind of quality. So after she left and went back home, I said, apply for a Gates Scholarship. She said, Dr. Warner, I'm not going to win that kind of scholarship. I said, Unique, apply for the scholarship. And so I kept calling her and calling her. She said, I'll get to it sooner or later. So finally, her baby sister, a year younger than her, said, Unique, you know that if you don't apply for the scholarship, Dr. Warner's going to be angry because he's already submitted his letter of reference. You need to apply for the scholarship. Now, if you don't know what a Gates Scholarship is, a Gates Scholarship is a 10-year scholarship, pays everything for 10 years, from undergraduate all the way through graduate school. 4 years of undergraduate, 6 years of graduate school. And Unique didn't want to apply for that, but I harassed her so much, she finally applied for it and ended up getting the scholarship. The year after that, her sister did the same thing and got a Gates Scholarship. So Unique went on to the University of Michigan. Her sister went on to MIT to get her undergraduate degree. Unique is now at LSU finishing up her PhD. Her sister finished her PhD at Berkeley, and she's working in the DC area. And so there's always a way. Your mentor can help you to guide you towards your best options. And one of the things, I'll give you some rules about mentoring. I don't make decisions for my mentee. I simply guide them and let them make the final decision because it is important that they make the final decision. And I'll explain that why later on. But let's go through a few case studies. What I want you to do is read this particular one first, and then use the chat to send out some possible solutions. And Robert, if you look at the chat and read some solutions that are being sent out, and then I'll give you the solution that I found for the student.
Sounds good.
You don't have to write a whole paragraph, just a short section saying how you would help the student, or tell them that it's impossible. Tell them that they need to decide on another career, maybe a related career in medicine, whatever you think is feasible.
Okay, we have one response from Dr. Wilson Kennedy. She says, suggest a science or biomedical focused MS degree program.
Okay, that's one solution. But I'll tell you this, Zakia, this young lady refused any alternative to anything other than medical school. She insisted she wanted to go to medical school.
We have another response from Lotus Jones, enter a post-bac program. Aisha says, talk to her about taking the MCAT.
She did take the MCAT, and she didn't do very well with those kinds of grades.
Stuart says, consider medical school abroad.
Okay, let me tell you what the solution I came up with. In fact, I just thought this young lady would not leave me alone. Dr. Warner, I want to go to medical school. And I finally said, you're serious about this, aren't you? And she says, I'm very serious. I say, well, I can think of only one option, but it's up to you whether you want to take that option. You're at Emory. Emory is a private school, and Emory is extremely hard on minority students. I don't know if it's because of the program. I don't know what it is, but I've seen some students that would be in other programs that would be 4.0 student practically flunk out of LSU. So the fact that Kurt had a 3.95 meant that young man was really, really brilliant. And so, okay, you had a 2.6 GPA at Emory. Across town is Georgia State. This is a school that is a smaller school, and they tend to have a better success rate with minority students. You haven't majored strictly in science. You've taken some side courses in science, just enough to get to medical school. But what I suggest, you go over to Georgia State. And I didn't really suggest it. I gave her it as an option. I said, the only thing I can see you can do is go over to Georgia State and then take a strictly science major like biology or chemistry and try to make a 4.0, highest possible GPA, then reapply to medical school. Okay. 3 years later, someone walks into my office. Do you remember me? And I looked at her and her face was very vaguely familiar. I said, oh yeah, I remember you. What are you doing now? And I really didn't remember her until she told me this story. She recanted the same story I just told you. I said, what are you doing now? She says, I'm in my second year of medical school. Whoa, young lady, how did you do that? Well, I did what you told me to do. It must have been 4 or 5 years later because the numbers aren't adding up now. But it was 4 or 5 years later because she said I took 2 or 3 years at Georgia State and got a degree in biology, had a 3.9 something grade point average, reapplied to medical school and got in. So she didn't lose her dream. She just went an alternative route, a longer route, and achieved her dream. Oh, and she say, oh, by the way, I'm engaged to a medical doctor. We'll be married next year. So she found a husband also. All you ladies, do not get mad at me. That's what she said. That she went to medical school. She also found a husband. I'm just repeating what she said.
Nothing wrong with that.
In this day and age, I don't like offending anybody, Diola, because some people can be offended these days. So lesson learned, there's always a path to your goal if you work hard enough. I honestly believe that there is always a path to your goal if you work hard enough. Case study 2. You supervise a laboratory of about a dozen students. As one student is clearly very bright and operates at the top level of your 12 students and will receive her PhD without any problem. However, it's also clear that she's not operating at her top capabilities. What advice should you give her, if any? Again, use the chat to make suggestions. Are we getting any suggestions, Robert?
Haven't gotten it yet. Okay, here's one from Angie. Says, ask her why she's holding back. Someone else says, okay, so this just says more time. Katie says, ask her what she wants to do with her career. Shreya says, ask her why she's not operating at the top of her abilities and have that conversation. Maybe there's something personal going on. Dr. Boko says, ask her what she would like to accomplish with this lab position. Dr. Wilson Kennedy says, put her in charge of some others. New responsibilities may help her see her behavior differently. Some more people saying, give her more responsibilities and leadership opportunities.
Okay, let me tell you what happened, and I'll even tell you who the student is and what she's doing now. Zakia is on the right mark, along with those other people that says give her more responsibility. But in fact, I did do that. She was in charge of some other graduate student. In fact, at one point, I saw her walking down the hall, and these 3 other graduate students following behind her. And I called her in. I said, what are you, Mama Duck or something? Why are they following you down the hall? You know? And then that's where we had that talk. I said, you're not working at your top level. Well, Dr. Warner, I'm doing better than anyone else in the laboratory. I said, I agree with that. But that's not what you should be gauging yourself by. You should be gauging yourself by your own capabilities. What are you capable of doing? Are you doing your best? And she said she left at that time and went and thought about it. And she realized I was right, that she was not operating at her best. So now that young lady works for Shell. And her most recent title was Game Changer. And that's literally a title, Game Changer. You know, and no other chemist, particularly an analytical chemist, had ever worked up that far, because when they look at her record, they're shocked because they think she's an engineer. Typically, they promote engineers to those levels. But here's an analytical chemist operating at that level. They keep wanting her to move on to get in line to be vice president of Shell. She doesn't want to because she has a family. She's still raising kids, about 3 kids she has to raise. And so when they ask, there are colleagues whom she's left behind, Alicia, how are you doing these things? You know, I mean, your background is not in this area. How did you know you're able to do these things? And I'm going to tell you her response, and because she told me her response. And when she told me her response, I started crying. Those of you who know me know I'm an emotional person. Her response was, Dr. Warner told me I could do these things. And she's not the only student who's told me that. I have a student at NIH who's really up there, and she says the same thing. A lot of my students tell me I give them confidence. And when I say, I don't give you confidence, I help you develop the confidence that you should have had all along. And so she received this kind of confidence because I pushed her hard. In fact, she says that in high school, her mother pushed her harder to be at the top. And she says, when she came to grad school, I took over where her mother left off and pushed her harder. One more case study. So lesson learned, your mentoring strategy is highly dependent on the student. I could have left her alone and she would have gone on and gotten a PhD and been just an average PhD. But because she had this confidence and recognized that she was a cut above the average, she went on to do that also in industry. In fact, I ran for president of ACS one year, and as a graduate student, I put her in charge of my presidency candidate. She's just incredible and could do so many things. Case study 3. You give a lecture on mentoring at a small college. Afterwards, a student comes to you and indicates that she is at a crossroad. She will be graduating soon, doesn't know what she wants to do with her chemistry degree. What advice should you give her, if any? Again, send your answers to the chat box.
Dr. Weiss says, you need to know more, so set aside time to talk.
Well, all I had was 10 minutes. I talked to her for 10 minutes and I had no more time than that because I had 10 minutes between that schedule and my next schedule. So I was a visiting scholar, and this was at the Claremont colleges in California. So I was on a fixed schedule. So I met this young lady for 10 minutes and had no more time than that.
Stuart says, no one's worse off with a PhD. Sheena says, ask her what about chemistry did she like and offer suggestions. Matthew Ware says, I recommend talking to the student about the things in chemistry that she likes. Fernando says, I would recommend that she take some time to reflect on the things that she enjoys doing and then to work with career professionals that can align those interests with careers. Lotus says, put her in touch with colleagues that could widen her horizons. Ask if she loves studying. PhDs can make people worse off financially, but if she loves theory, PhD is a good option. Dr. Boko is saying, talk to other women in chemistry and see what they do.
Okay, let me tell you what happened. First of all, I asked her what was her GPA, and she said it's a 3.4. Well, I said, why aren't you going to graduate school? Oh, Dr. Warner, I wouldn't get accepted in the graduate school. Why wouldn't you? Well, all my friends have 3.8, 3.9. I can't compete with them. young lady, a 3.4 from a Claremont college will get you into any university in this country. You need to apply. Oh, I'm not sure that I want to do that. Okay, that's the last. I got her email address. I came back to LSU. And as I do with many of my mentees, if they come across my mind, I'll then email them. In her case, she came across my mind a week or two later. I emailed her. I said, I haven't seen your application to LSU yet for graduate school. And heard nothing from her. 2 weeks later, I email again. Still looking for your application to graduate school. She said after about the third email from me, she realized this guy is not going to leave me alone until I apply. So she says, if I'm going to apply to LSU, I might as well apply to a bunch of schools. So she applied to LSU and she applied to several other schools and ended up going to one of the schools in the Northeast. I don't remember which one, but she postdoc at Princeton. And she is now a professor at Arizona State University, she and her husband. And to show you what an impact now, you can say, well, she was going to do that anyway. And my conversation just accelerated that. That's not quite true. First of all, she was not going to apply. Second of all, after she started applying, I got a call from her father thanking me for putting a fire under her to get her to start doing something and applying. He said she was in a quandary until she talked to me. And her father's one of my biggest fans. There are people at LSU like Dr. Rivera's who was wearing an LSU hat in San Francisco, walking through the airport, and her father stopped him. You're from LSU? Do you know Isiah Warner? You know, and at that time I had not met her father. I just got that email from her, but I've since met him. She's originally from Hawaii. And so when my wife and I went to Hawaii, we spent time with she and her father and her sister. And so that young lady also called me while in graduate school and said, Dr. Warner, I want to apply for an NSF fellowship. And everybody's telling me I have no chance because they're only given to 4.0 students. I said, well, your undergraduate teachers are telling you that? She said, yes, and my advisor. I said, ignore them. I'll tell you, there's only one case where you have no chance if you don't apply. I say, ignore them, apply. Guess what? She got the fellowship on the first try and called me up and said, thank you, thank you. She said, if it were not for your advice, I would have never even applied. So she got that graduate fellowship, went on to postdoc at Princeton, and also her husband, then her boyfriend or fiance, was also postdocing at Princeton. Now they're both on the faculty at Arizona State. Guess what? I have sent them 2 minority students, graduate students. One is a young Hispanic woman who went to Emory. And as I said about Emory, you know, they don't treat minorities very well. And she graduated from Emory with about a 3.28 or something like that. And so this young lady then emails me and say, Dr. Warren, I'm trying to get into graduate school, but I have no luck whatsoever. I said, well, where are you? Where? She says, I'm at home. I said, where is that? She said, that's in Arizona. I said, is there a university near you? She said, Arizona State. I said, oh my goodness, do I have a deal for you? And so I call up this young lady that I had mentored and told her I have an assignment for her. She now has to mentor someone else. Now, because of her GPA, the young lady had a difficult time getting into the school, but she had worked with me as an undergraduate, and I knew her qualifications better than anyone else in that grades did not simply reflect her qualifications. She's an outstanding student. So my mentee fought to get her into graduate school, and she's in graduate school. Second time, one of my STEM scholars had gone to work. They said, Dr. Warner, I've been pondering that I want to go back to graduate school, and I'm on this job and I'm not being fulfilled. I said, where are you? He says, I'm in Arizona. Arizona. I said, what's the nearest university? He said, Arizona State. I said, oh my goodness. So I sent him to Laura, and both of these students are working. I guess the Hispanic student is in her husband's lab, and the African-American male is in her laboratory. He's getting a degree in chemical engineering, but her work overlaps with chemical engineering so that she has a joint faculty position in chemical engineering. So those are the 3 case studies. I'd be glad to talk to you individually, but I want to give you a take-home message. There's no single mentoring formula for all students. You have to adjust your mentoring depending on the student. If you don't believe in a student, don't mentor them, because all you're going to do is mess that student up. And I have a problem in that I believe in every student. And so I don't have a problem with mentoring any kind of student. I believe in all of them. A student's background is not the most important characteristic for success. So many years we've thought that if a student was a 2.6, I can tell you about an undergraduate that I had who was a 2.6 student. I sent him to graduate school to work with a professor who was considered one of the toughest in the country. And he came out of there, and that professor begged me to send another student just like him, because they both fell in love with each other. That young man is a PhD now, operating at the top levels of an organization. I won't describe the organization because I don't want you to necessarily know who the person is, but he's at the top level of a high level organization. So it's not the most important thing, the background. The most important characteristic is how hard that student is willing to work. The young lady who was willing to go back to school and get an additional degree, that's what determines her getting into medical school. And finally, there's almost always a path for a student to achieve his or her goal. And the reason I say almost always is because there might be something I haven't thought about that there. But what I honestly believe is this: there's always a path for a student to achieve his or her goal. I just say almost always because maybe there's something I haven't thought about. But I have not encountered a student yet who's not able to achieve their goal if they're willing to go that path. Now, some have not followed the path and achieved their goal, but I do believe that if they had followed one of the options that was given to them, they would have achieved their goal. And so I take any other questions that any persons might have.
So you can go ahead and put questions in the chat.
I'm going to end the show.
Okay.
And then see if I can.
Well, I have a comment, but I cannot type fast enough in the chat.
Go ahead, Dr. Bagayoko.
Yeah, the comment I have is that pertaining to one of the students he talked about who told him that she also found a husband. Well, for 20 or 30 years, it has been a practice of mine at Southern University and A&M College in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, to tell explicitly to my female student that we are here to get a degree. Fine. But at Southern University, 60+% of the students all those years have been female. Therefore, there are very, very few male being prepared to be at their level. I said, hence, I'm not telling you to do anything rush and so forth, but pay attention to the fact that there are not going to be that many eligible candidates at your level when you get your PhD. So if along the way you can arrange something, so be it. I'm just saying and for many of them, it has worked out beautifully. Just a comment.
Great, thank you, Dr. Bagayoko. So I'm not seeing questions, but I am seeing praise for the talk. Thank you, Lotus. Lotus says that was a fabulous presentation. Aisha as well, saying it was a wonderful presentation. And I personally agree with that as well. Okay, Jay Yoder has a question, but they say it's going to take some time to think through. If anyone else has questions, please feel free to put them in the chat.
Now, when do we get the recording as a treasure to keep or any review in the future?
Apparently, I had the recorder off at some point. So, Robert, what I can do is add those. Go back. There are a few slides, I guess, that I didn't have the recorder on. Is that right, or was the recorder on the entire time?
It should have been on. It's been
okay.
from my end.
Okay.
So that's a great question about the recording. And we will post this recording on our website probably late next week. And I will email a link to everyone who registered so that they can access this. So it'll probably be up towards the end of next week. We do have a question from Dr. Ortiz. Dr. Ortiz is on our advisory board for the LS-PAC Model Center. Dr. Ortiz says, what leads you to believe in a student?
I'm going to explain that in my mentoring book. So I'm going to let you guys know, I hope to have my mentoring book out by the end of next year. But I know my background, and I know that I'm not supposed to be where I am today. Okay, I went to a segregated school, and Emil and I, in fact, Emil Peter and I went to school together. You know, we had no math class above geometry. We were simply given algebra and geometry. And Emil reminded me of something. I had never heard the word calculus before I went to college. You know, and so I went to Southern, and Southern helped prepare me for that world out there. And I'm not supposed to be where I am today. And I am in a place simply because there were mentors along the way for me. And in my book, I spell out who all those mentors were, the key mentors in my life who helped me get to where I am. And if I can achieve what I achieved, Robert was sort of off of my publications. I have almost 400 publications with Robert. So
that was probably from a couple of years ago. So
yeah, it is. I have 400 publications. My H-index is 64. Not bragging. I'm just trying to tell you why I am not supposed to be where I am. There's nothing in my background that would suggest that I would be SEC Professor of the Year, or that I would be a Boyd Professor, which is the highest rank in LSU. You got to remember, I could not attend LSU, yet I have achieved the highest possible professorial rank at LSU. And if I can do all of that, there is no reason I should doubt any student can achieve what they want.
The key is the effort, sustained effort.
That's right, sustained effort, working hard enough.
Yep.
And it was just recently that I heard Dr. Bagayoko speak that I realized we were saying very similar things, just in different words.
Yep.
Yeah.
And to everyone asking about the talk being posted, yes, the talk will be posted on our website probably late next week. And we will send out a link to everyone who attended So you can view that and share that. We do have a question. Someone is saying, this is sort of like one of your case studies, Dr. Warner, but it's from someone else. And I think it's something that they're wondering about. So it says, at my institution, there's an African-American man who is a junior. He works very hard, but another faculty member says that he has trouble with some kinds of thinking required for research. And I have to admit, I somewhat share that opinion for this particular student, but I've thought about inviting him to do undergraduate research, and I wonder how you would advise me how to mentor him if I did bring him into my undergraduate research program.
Okay, first of all, look up that Michigan paper that I told you about, that where they did a study of students that got involved. It's what's her name now? She's at a university in California. She's an Hispanic. I can't think of her name now. That's why I'm retiring. I can't remember things the way I used to.
No
Sylvia Hurtado. Sylvia Hurtado. Look up some papers by Sylvia Hurtado, and Hurtado. And what they found when she was at Michigan was that students who got involved in research actually started thinking better, because that hands-on connection to the theoretical problem actually helped improve their thinking. I think start with a small project and eventually give them their own project so they have to think through it. And just the process of thinking through that project, making mistakes, helps them to learn how chemistry works, how research works. That's my suggestion. I just don't believe that there is a student who can't do research. I give you an example. One of our students who was a freshman wanted to get into a program at the MIT and apply to the MIT program. MIT called me up. We don't take freshmen for our summer program. I said, if you take this particular student, you will start taking students. We don't take, I said, look, try out this one student. Maybe your thinking is wrong. Just try this one student. From then on, every summer, I get a call from MIT. Do you have any more freshmen that want to come to our research program? Every summer, they still call me, even though the program doesn't exist anymore. So you should not give up on a student or not make assumptions about a student. Students tend to surprise you. And you get them involved in research. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Any more questions, Robin?
I don't see any other questions right now. If anyone has questions, we have a couple minutes. Go ahead and write that in the chat.
John, I just see you're on the. How are you? How are things that you're muted? You're muted, John.
Just enjoying listening to you, sir.
Okay.
This has been a great afternoon.
How are things at the community college?
Things are going well. We are becoming an example for the nation for the PPI grant.
Good, good.
And you have played a part in that, sir. Trust me, and the students that you've moved along.
So Jesse Broussard, I believe at ULL, is asking, what's the name of your new book?
I have a name, but I understand when you go to publishers, they might change the name. So I just have a simple name like The Mentor, and I haven't approached publishers yet. I'm trying to write a book proposal, but I understand publisher will force you to change sometimes. force you to change the name.
If there are any other questions, please put them in the chat. And if not, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Go ahead.
Robert, before we wrap up, Emil, tell something about our high school and expand on some of the things that I've forgotten about in our high school, if you got a chance. If there are things that you can think of that I didn't talk about. Emil was Val of his class. I was Val of my class. Emil went on to major in chemistry at Southern. I had to go on to major in chemistry at Southern. He was a year ahead of me. He went on to get his PhD at the University of Washington. I had to go to the University of Washington, get my PhD. So he's my role model. All the way from elementary school, we've known each other.
Thank you so much, Isaiah. I really appreciate that. Before I talk about what happened at our high school, when you introduce Dr. Warner, it's never mentioned the number of postdocs he supervised. I think that should be mentioned as well. That also says just how much he's thought of throughout the country. And I know I've interacted with a few of his postdocs over the years. He even had one of his students come and visit me at the University of Washington. We did a tour of campus, had lunch at the faculty club. So yes.
You know that young lady has a PhD now?
That's great.
Yeah.
I believe it.
Yeah.
Whatever you touch turns to gold.
Yeah. She's another one of those students where I won't mention the well-known name, but I introduced to a well-known person, and I told that person she wanted to get a PhD, and he said, first thing he said, what's your GPA? And she told him, said, well, you'll never get a PhD. Well, she has a PhD now. So again, I never give up on a student.
Yeah, well, at Carver High School, and I like to tell people the story about, I grew up 15 miles outside of the school. And so I had to get bused 15 miles each way every day. And initially, the school was called Bunkie Colored School. And then it became Bunkie Consolidated, and finally George Washington Carver. So for me, going to segregated schools is one of the best things, I believe the best thing that could have ever happened to me. Because at that school, if you were a good student, you got so much support from the teachers. And the teachers wanted us all to be prepared for the outside world. That's the same thing that happened at Southern University. They were preparing us to be as good as we possibly could be. And my greatest mentor in high school was my English and literary teacher, and she was the guidance counselor.
Who was your English teacher?
Jean Ellis Jones.
Jean Ellis Jones was my mentor.
Yeah.
She's the first person I mentioned in my mentoring book.
Yeah.
An English teacher.
Yes. She thought I could do anything.
She's same thing with me. Same thing with me.
Involved in, and that meant so much to me.
Yeah.
And for me, I always wanted to do well for my father because he was real tough. And in fact, when he was teaching me my ABCs, that's when I learned how to become self-taught because he was so mean about it. I said, well, I gotta get this done so I don't have to deal with him. And
one part of Eagle's story that he's leaving out, you were blind until you were about
almost 4 years old.
Almost 4 years old.
Yeah, and in fact, I didn't start school until I was 7.
Yeah.
And I was actually put in the slow group in first grade. They had one column, but that didn't last for but a short period of time. And but what made for me to do well was the encouragement I got from my teachers. And I do not believe that if I had attended an integrated school that I would have gotten that encouragement. And had I not, I probably wouldn't have gone on to where I am today. And Isiah is, he's been great for me. He's got me involved in a senior analytical chemist job at Ciba-Geigy in North Carolina. And we have arguably the best academic support program in the country. And in 1998, he made that happen by inviting me to a conference at LSU titled Mentoring for the 21st Century. And that's when I realized what he was telling me, because he could just look at what was going on at this center and knew that we had one of the best, if not the best in the country.
It was a very special program, and they had not publicized it. It was a well-kept secret at the University of Washington.
Yes.
But once emails started going out and telling them about it, wow, I mean, you guys have been bombarded by people wanting to know more about it.
Yes. In fact, the senior program.
You're writing a book on that center, right?
Yes, I've just, well, it's their entire program, the diversity program at UW, but the center is a double award-winning program. In fact, we received the Teaching Excellence Award from the Teaching Academy at UW, and we are not a part of an academic program, but we've done so well with our students. We've over almost 25,000 students have gone through the program since 1981 that we know of have gone on to earn degrees. And we have students who've gone on to graduate school, professional, especially professional schools, and become outstanding students. And this was 1998 when I realized that we were one of the best programs, because we had never presented. And it also motivated me to collect data. We can show if students use the services in different drop-in centers in our workshops, which are really supplemental instruction, that they can increase their grade point as high as 1.3 and improve the probability of them graduating from college at a probability of 36%. And our users have a graduation rate of 81%. And that ranks, if it was an institution, a Research One institution, it ranked about 30th in the US News and World Report national colleges. And all this motivated me and us to be where we are today. Is Isiah had a lot to do with that, because he was the first to recognize that we had something special. And the vice provost at Michigan, Lester Montz, who's retired now, said that we were the jewel in the crown of the University of Washington, a model for all higher education to follow. So our success.
I have been all over this country. I've never seen a program like the one you guys have. We have a Center for Academic Success, but it does not touch your program.
One of the unique things about the program is that we have professional instructors who are discipline specific. Not only do they teach study skills, but they have the strategies to show students how to become lifelong learners. We've had students use the program almost every day, and people will say, well, you're making them dependent. And one example is a student who went on to work for NASA, and when the O-ring malfunctioned on Challenger, she worked on a team to make that correction. And she didn't have a tutor back then. She didn't have an instructor. It was based on her becoming, confident in herself.
Right.
And also we teach them to become lifelong learners. And I'm a big proponent of the strategies that Dr. Sandra McGuire uses. I just want to say one thing, Dr. Bagliocco, one of your Timbuktu students was my son, Alton Petrie. And he has been at Army Corps of Engineers since 1996, I think, or 98, and he's still there. And his oldest daughter just got a full ride to Northern Arizona University. So thank you so much for your help there. And he loved the University of Washington, but he wanted to go to my alma mater. So he chose Southern University. And so thank you for what you've done for him. And I really love your strategy about excellence, practicing make you better, not only in athletics, but in intellectual pursuits. And in fact, I have a book here that talks about the road to excellence. And I really believe in that. And so, and I first met you in 1998. So it was very, I'll never forget that whole experience at LSU that year. And so I'll let my son Alton know that I saw you today.
I see Deola gets emotional like I do. He's wiping a tear from his eye.
Yeah. So thank you for this opportunity.
There is no greater satisfaction than working with students and seeing them getting their goal. Rafael Luna, I did not know you were on. How are you?
Dr. Luna, you're on mute.
I'm doing well. I'm just inspired. You know, you mentioned Dr. Mildred Smalley. She taught me Gen Chem. She was the one that I went to when I failed my first chemistry test, and she walked me through. She's like, I thought I was going to have to drop the class. And she says, she realized I didn't know algebra. So she would tutor me algebra while I would learn the chemistry. And I was able to get a B in her class. And then I ended up with the highest GPA in biology. So, but wow. I credit Mildred Smalley. I was going to turn around if it wasn't for her. So, you know.
For those of you still on the line, Unique Luna that I talked about, that was his baby sister. So Dr. Luna was the one I was talking about who wrote this book on scientific storytelling. Wonderful book. If you guys have not gotten a copy of that book, you have to get a copy. I have several copies.
I'd like to mention, Dr. Luna, that I'm working on my book proposal, and I tried to identify the protagonist in my book.
Oh, nice.
The book started with the Black Student Union taking over the president's office to get the program that we have been around for 52 years started. So I named them my first protagonist. And the second was the program that's been in existence for 52 years that has contributed to thousands of students who've graduated and gone on to influence millions of students. So that was my second protagonist. But so I got that idea from your seminar, so it's included in my book proposal.
Oh, that's wonderful, and I can't wait till that book is out. I would love to read it, order a few copies, and share it. And also, I want to also give you and Dr. Warner and Dr. Bakio a shout out, because my daughter, when she sees Black excellence, it's not just like the impact you men have done in my life, but then also my sister's life, and how my sisters are impacting my daughter, who's 17 years old, and she wants to go to MIT just like her aunt. And I don't know, we can't guarantee that, but then I said, well,
I predict she will get a Gates scholarship.
Yeah. and so she takes the SAT, because she got a 98% in math. She tries to get it up. She gets a 99 percentile, missed one problem on the math section of SAT. And before, I think she used to settle with like getting in the 80th percentile of math. And one of my friends, I was like, well, kept saying, why don't you shoot for excellence? And then she just started studying for the SAT, and then she was able to still jump up to 99 percentile and got 5s on all her AP physics and calculus. And I think part of that, because she saw my sisters in chemistry, and she saw, even visiting Louisiana and, and meeting Dr. Warner. Like, I think that your legacy is so far reaching that, it's more than just academics. It's changing families' lives and giving my daughter hope, where I don't have to tell her to turn off the TV. You know, she's telling me to turn off the TV because she needs to sleep and she has a test in the morning. I'm like, what kind of teenager are you? You know, you should be watching TV with your dad, but like, no, she's like, I gotta go to sleep. I need my rest. I got my chemistry test tomorrow. And she's doing organic chemistry as a senior. But a lot of that's from mentoring and what I learned from you, Dr. Warner, you know, and Dr. Bakayoko over time and performance. So I use that with the students at Boston College and Gateway, you know, underrepresented students. So your legacy is far reaching. It'll be far reaching for the next 100 years at least. So with all your mentees making an impact all across the country and the world.
Dr. Luna, are you from Boston?
I'm from Washington, D.C. And I went to Southern undergrad, and then, you know, I loved it. Then I went to LSU for my PhD, and, you know, I got all my education there because I kind of flunked out of school and up north at a majority institution. So I, you know, Southern gave me my shot. And
Unique tells me this story when she was coming down to work for me, and she was driving by herself from DC, and you told her to be careful what town she stopped in, because she wasn't aware of the kinds of problems that a Black might encounter in some of these small towns, you know. And so it's interesting how, you know, she moved from DC to Louisiana, and now she's back in Louisiana telling her, doing her PhD.
Yeah, it's an incredible impact. And you know, and so what you're doing is just far ahead of your time. And like what you and Emil and Dr. Bakayoko have done, I don't see other people to that level of success. I just haven't seen it, you know. And so, especially with such a hard chemistry subject of chemistry and physics, like it's unheard of. Like it's really unheard of. So I can't wait till all your books are published and I get to have that collection. You know, I'll have that collection.
Yeah, one of our notable alumni has the last name Luna, and he's actually two of them. A brother who, one is a medical doctor and the other one is an accomplished lawyer, and they both have last names Luna, and they come from Boston. So.
Oh, okay. I might be related then.
You might be. Do your ancestry DNA.
Originally from the Dominican Republic, right?
Yeah, my dad's from the Dominican. I think the Dominicans have there's some Lunas, but there are a lot of Dominicans in the Boston area.
Yeah.
So, and from Lawrence, so there are a lot there. So I might be related.
Yeah. What his name is Waka Luna.
Waka Luna. Okay, I'm gonna have to look him up.
Waka Luna. He's a medical doctor now, and his brother
Dr.
is.
Petra?
Pardon?
Petra, I didn't get the name of your program.
It's the Office of Minority Affairs and Diversity Instructional Center.
Okay,
that's
thank you.
the program I directed for 13 years. I served as a chemistry instructor there for 21 years.
In fact, when I was in graduate school, he recruited me to work in that program. And I worked with students, tutoring them in chemistry and various other areas.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, the university we consider ourselves really lucky because usually after student protests, you might get more students coming to the institution. You get a Black Studies program, and that's pretty much it. But at the University of Washington, we got all those things, but then there was a program put in place to support those students to ensure that they would have the best chance of navigating a pretty competitive university.
And you guys had one of the earliest Office of Minority Affairs in the country, right?
Yeah, we started in '68. And it came about after a 4-hour occupation of the president's office. And once they committed to setting up that program, it started with $50,000 and 12 full-time and part-time faculty. Now there are 257 students. And now we're charged to serve over 6,000 students and with 120 staff and a budget of $20 million.
Wow.
And it's a combination of state-supported and federally funded programs.
And your minority affairs officer was a vice president, right? He was given rank.
He was the first vice president of a minority/diversity program in America. He came in 1970. He was a retired colonel, and he said he would only take the position if they made him vice president because he wanted to have the ear of the president. He didn't want to be buffeted by deans and other vice presidents. He wanted to make sure that he could influence the president. And he did very, very well. In fact, I think we're the only academic support program with that many professional instructors. Usually there are learning specialists. Right. And have doctorates and that's it. So 80% of our instructors have masters and PhDs. And one has been there since 1987. And they're really underpaid, but they're so committed to helping our students be successful. And the university put $1 million a year into that program. So they were committed to it being successful as well. And when the program was initially started, the first director was a microbiology professor who was at the time the chair of the faculty senate. And he wrote to all faculty and staff and asked them to contribute at least an hour of their pay per month to support these students. And we've had support throughout the years. We created an endowment in 1990. We have around $7 million in that endowment that we use to support students. And we, since the George Floyd incident, we developed a Black Opportunity Fund to support Black students at the University of Washington. And they used me to write the letter of appeal. And right now we've had almost 500 donors, and we're up to $200,000 to support Black students. So our university is hidden in the corner of America, but unique things happen there, and we get the opportunity to do things that others do not. And
well, I see that Robert is. I forgot, Robert, that you can't leave.
Okay, it's time to go.
Yeah, so I don't want to hold him away from his family on a Friday afternoon.
Okay.
So I appreciate you hanging around. It is so good talking to all of you guys. Vince, it's good seeing you again.
You.
Dr. Bagioka and Raphael and everyone else.
Thanks.
From HHMI, I appreciate all of you guys coming out. And this was really an enjoyable event, Robert, I think.
Absolutely.
Isiah, I just typed in a question, but since things are about to break up, I just wanted to ask you directly. What is the last name of Sally, the person that you mentored who got a PhD at Auburn?
Sally Mathis. Matheson, yes, Matheson.
Okay, so does she work for EPA in Los Angeles, or?
No, I think she works for the city.
Okay, so
the city. That's right. I forgot the connection with Auburn. Yes.
Yeah, I was wondering how long ago was that PhD?
Probably about 20 years ago. She worked for the young man who left there and is now in Europe. He left you guys.
The electrochemist. Yeah,
the electrochemist. Right.
Yeah.
That's who she worked for.
Right. Okay. But Sally
Matheson.
Okay. Right. All right. Good. Thanks for the information.
Okay.
Lovely talk.
All
Good to see you again.
This was great. This was great. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This was inspirational, as always, every time you speak, Dr. Warner, Dr. Petra, Dr. Bagioka, Dr. Luna. It was great to hear you guys talk as well. And so we ought
to form a chat group. It's clear that we enjoy talking about these issues.
We do.
Amen.
Robert, we ought to form a chat group as part of the center, where we invite all of these people that have these questions and things. And we talk about a lot of these issues.
Sounds
Dr.
good.
Warner, that could be a big part of the Mentor Cafe where we come in and just have conversations.
That's right.
Right.
You
Beautiful.
count me in on that one. You count me in.
All
All
right.
right, well, we will do that.
Just, I didn't realize you were still on there.
Oh, yes, I'm not leaving until it's over.
Okay, I'll have a limited view of everyone.
Well, thank y'all. Yeah, we will certainly.
It was great,
make
y'all.
A cafe. Thanks to everybody who attended. We had a great turnout.
And I see Melissa.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
I'm on. I'm on too.
Yeah, I know.
I'm on twice. I started off at home, and now I'm in carpool on my phone, so it's probably still up from my house.
And I see Dr. Wiley.
Mm-hmm.
Very
good.
All right. All of you all take care. It was good talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to implement the cafe where we talk to people around the country.
We'll do.
Yes.
Do that with Zoom.
Very good idea.
It's a great idea.
Wonderful idea.
Take care.
Seriously.
Say hi
Yes,
to
sir, I'm
Della.
here. No, I'm here.
You have to implement it.
Okay, I will. No problem at all.
Okay.
Do we think a monthly kind of cafe where we get together would be good?
It doesn't have to be that often. I say
Okay.
once a semester.
I like it. Okay, sounds good. We'll get working on it.
Yes, we will. All right. Well,
Take care.
thank you all. Have a good afternoon. Have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.